from Russia. Russia supplied us with weapons in Kutokonaval. Cuba supplied us with soldiers. MK was drunk. Cuba brought the soldiers. Russia brought the armaments. We were supposed to be the ones that are being complimented and supported by these other countries who were found wanting.
Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear.
An observation that's made here by one of our listeners. He says that the EFF's national shutdown means that the ANC can no longer claim to be the only party that has a national footprint to organize and mobilize South Africans politically. It's almost that there's this competition between the two parties around who has this ability to mobilize.
I don't think it's necessarily just the two parties. I think that everybody is under pressure to deliver higher numbers than ever before. And so all politicians are trying to make sure that at the next national election, we have as high participation as possible. And I think that all of them are politicking and politicking. Neither of them have the moral ground on any of these issues because all of them have failed to deliver a government for us.
Asanda Washeng, who is a political analyst.
Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear on SAfm. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. At SAfm Radio and at Oliver_speaking on Twitter.
It has just gone 9 minutes after 6 p.m. and it's a Friday. Welcome to the Talking Point. Well, my apologies. Welcome to This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson. It's an honor and a pleasure to be in your company. Thank you so much for joining us. It really is an important broadcast we're bringing here on this Friday. Two stories that we're covering today, and we're starting first, of course, with the ICC's issuance of a warrant arrest for Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. The question really is, controversially so, will Putin be arrested by anyone ever at any point, firstly? And secondly, what is the case that the ICC has against Russia? And then third, and this seems to be a very important question in the minds of many people, is whether or not the ICC is a credible institution. And that, of course, is a question that we will be exploring. More pressingly so, Vladimir Putin is set to visit South Africa in August this year. Will the South African government, cabinet is yet to meet on this, arrest him? That is the question. It's going to be another potentially awkward al-Bashir moment for South Africa, where it finds itself with egg in the face. Or will it be courageous and take a stance and say, wait, hold on. Despite the fact that we're a signatory to the ICC, we don't believe that this is a credible warrant of arrest, which means that South Africa would be endorsing Russia's because if it's not credible, it means that Putin is not a war criminal. That means South Africa doesn't see what Russia does to Ukraine as a crime of war. And that will be an important distinction. Professor Anthony van Nieuwkerk is with us, who's an international relations expert. Prof. Van Nieuwkerk, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's never a good time when I speak to you. Let's start there. Will any country ever arrest Vladimir Putin at any point?
Yeah, no, it's not a good time. I hope you can hear me well.
Perfectly so.
Okay, yeah, and it's not a good time. It's a Friday afternoon. The weekend is ahead. We want to move away from crisis, drama, conflict, and then puzzles that seemingly can't be solved anytime soon. And you're right, this is another one of those. But let me be bold and say that President Vladimir Putin will never be arrested and delivered to the ICC in The Hague to stand trial for alleged war crimes. It'll never happen. In the same way that George Bush or Tony Blair will never be arrested and delivered to The Hague to stand trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by their countries. Yeah.
Yeah. You can be a part of this conversation. Give us a call. The number to dial is 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032. I'm taking your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107. And remember, keep those WhatsApp voice notes short, under a minute. Make sure that we're able to hear you. If we can't hear you, Lisiro's not going to play it. Turn on the radio so we can be able to hear you. You can also send me a WhatsApp. You can also tweet me. It is at Oliver_speaking, on Twitter, Oliver Dickson on Facebook. I'd love to hear from you on this. Prof, if you're saying that Vladimir Putin is never going to be arrested, it means August, when he comes to South Africa, the South African government will just not arrest him. Why?
I foresee three scenarios, three possibilities of how this conundrum can play out. Yeah. So the first one is he comes to South Africa, he comes to Pretoria, he represents the Russian Federation as an important member of the BRICS alliance. It's a very important summit, by the way, Oliver. I mean, you should dedicate a talk show to that, because BRICS is poised to become a much more important global player if it admits members such as Saudi Arabia or Iran or others. So there's a dynamic that I think we anticipate with bated breath. So Putin comes, he attends the BRICS summit. Either he gets arrested or not. So there are two scenarios. The third one is he doesn't come to the BRICS summit, he stays away, or the BRICS summit is held elsewhere, namely in Moscow, to allow him to participate. Remember the BRICS, what is on the BRICS agenda? Why is it so important for Putin to attend? I mean, I think overshadowing all of the activities of the BRICS alliance, including trade and cybersecurity and good relations and new members, all of that complicated agenda. The one that overshadows all of that is the war in Ukraine between NATO and Russia, and whether a peace process is possible. That is number one priority. And of course, Putin is so the Chinese and the Russians are really at the heart of the matter. So he has to attend the summit. If the summit happens in South Africa, he will probably attend, and we won't arrest him for the same reason that we didn't arrest Omar al-Bashir. At the time, if I can say this maybe in 1 minute, I don't know if I can. At the time when al-Bashir came to attend an AU summit, which we hosted in Pretoria, I think, political tensions were very high in Sudan. In fact, we had peacekeepers or personnel as part of a peace support operation in Darfur. And just from a practical perspective, the Sudanese said, this is our head of state. If you arrest him on behalf of some other third party who sits in Europe somewhere, there'll be trouble at home. You will bring trouble to the negotiations process, which didn't really take off at the time, so they were exaggerating. But I mean, there was potential for violence and for conflict, and we had people in the country, and we didn't want to put them at risk. And anyway, the argument was, it's a legal argument, and you might want to ask a lawyer to weigh in on this. Isn't it so that a sitting head of president has immunity from prosecution until such time that he or she retires or steps down or is overthrown? Then we can talk another story. That argument was used as well. I think our appeals court turned that down. But I do think that there's a debate to be had about the status of a sitting elected head of state, a president, whether you can actually arrest him.
Yeah, not to talk law, but to talk legal pressure. Let's focus, drawing context from the al-Bashir moment. The Democratic Alliance took the ANC to court, while it took government to court when it failed to arrest al-Bashir, right? Similarly,
that's correct.
They could do it this time around as well, but they could do it preemptively. They could go to court and seek a court order that says that should al-Bashir Putin arrive in South Africa, that the court must preemptively order that he be arrested, giving life to the ICC arrest warrant, given that we're a signatory to the ICC. A court reasonably could find and issue such order. Should he then arrive and the South African government, i.e. the Minister of Police, fails to arrest Vladimir Putin, he would be in contempt of a court order. Now, the sanction for contempt is jail time. It's not a fine. It's actual jail time. We saw that with Jacob Zuma. the Minister of Police could potentially go to jail. The Minister of International Relations could potentially be have their hands muddied in legal matters, as would the President. In fact, Cabinet, right, would be in contempt of court should it take a order or should Cabinet resolve that Vladimir Putin would not be arrested should he arrive for the BRICS summit. You do not want to see officials in government facing warrants of arrest for jail time, because then really we've descended into legal chaos. Could you see a scenario like that playing out, and what do you think the eventuality would be? Would the president appeal to Putin to not come?
Yeah. No, I think you sketch a likely scenario. I mean, it's probably papers are being drawn up as we speak, Oliver. Yeah. So you can, get the DA to comment on this, or any member of the political opposition, because the government is in a conundrum. It's in an awkward position. The al-Bashir case might repeat itself. So I think there's political, mileage to be had here. So this court case might come. When I listen to Minister Pandor, I think she is very careful in the way that she speaks about the ICC case. And what South Africa has to do. No, let me clarify. She's quite blunt about the status and the value of the ICC. She casts doubt. She says it's not a credible organization or institution. But she is much more careful when it comes to our own legal position. And she does say that Cabinet will have to weigh the pros and the cons. And I do foresee a negotiated settlement of this particular conflict, if I can use that phrase.
So let's pause on that for a moment. The credibility of the ICC. Jacob Zuma, after al-Bashir was not arrested, asked that South Africa withdraws from the ICC as a signatory. Uhuru Kenyatta went on a crusade across the continent, appealing to leaders across the continent on the same matter. The ANC this past December resolved not to do that. It is the position of the ANC that government, South Africa, should remain a signatory to the ICC. Yet, the Minister of International Relations, who is also a member of the National Executive Council and National Working Committee of the ANC, cast aspersions on the credibility of the ICC. You and I, perhaps as non-political actors, can agree that the ICC is a non-credible body that, persecutes and focuses only on African leaders and never so on Tony Blair and George Bush and so on. But what should the official debate framework be about the ICC's credibility from government's perspective?
Yeah. No, you make a good point. In my view, there was a failure of leadership to tackle this issue when it arose after al-Bashir, and now history is caught up with us, or with government, or South Africa, and it's now forced into a very awkward position. It should have resolved the matter as follows, in my view. South Africa signed up to the ICC. It domesticated the Rome Statute. And you pointed out earlier in our conversation that it has an obligation to carry out an arrest warrant. It signed up. It's a member of the club. It must follow the rules. Yeah. If it doesn't want to follow the rules, it must resign from the club and move away. It's not doing that because at the consequence of the al-Bashir case was, we haven't discussed this in detail. Many people say, but why is it that African dictators are always, put before the ICC to be held accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity, genocide, etc.? There's a long list. And we don't see Europeans or Asians or anybody else actually on that list. Well, if we are serious about protecting and advancing human rights in the African context, we should pay less attention to the ICC and develop an instrument, a legal instrument, a continental African court of justice that can do exactly the same thing as the ICC is supposed to do. And then there'll be no excuse that the ICC is being used by the Western powers or by the big powers and is a plaything in the hand of dominant others. Then we have to be responsible for taking care of dictators in our own continent. And I'm afraid to say that this has not happened in the 3 or 4 years since the Bashir case has unlocked the potential for Africans to be serious about human rights.
Many scholars then argue that should an African instrument be developed, that it would be dead in the waters from the start. It really wouldn't be effective because the African Brotherhood would continue to protect itself and the network that it survives on, right? African dictators seemingly are in each other's company and enjoy each other's coverage. The ICC, many argue, is the alternative to that. It's not beholden to an African brotherhood and brothers in arms against the liberation struggle and decoloniality, many argue. Could we have a formidable alternative really truly exist?
Yeah, I mean, let's not be overly cynical as you are right now. I think a very lively, let me try and make the case in one or two sentences. You know, civil society, our legal profession, NGOs, the research and academic and intellectual environment in Africa is very strong and very lively in many parts of Africa.
Yeah.
Not everywhere, but in many, including South Africa. Or if you go to, I mean, I can make a list of countries where you will find a very powerful intellectual argument for saying where the AU or SADC or ECOWAS is captured by ruling elites, let us formulate the alternatives to those powerful positions and push and put this item on the agenda. And in fact, I mean, SADC has in its constitution a sentence that says SADC will be run by governments, by heads of state in consultation with civil society. Let's reactivate that forgotten sentence. The same is true of the AU. There's an ECOSOC with a double C, an Economic and Social Council, which is meant to bring civil society and the non-state sector into play when it comes to working with the AU. I mean, if South Africa wants to provide leadership together with, 3 or 4 other countries from the 4 or 5 different regions, why not take this issue forward immediately and then make a breakthrough and then escape, this enormous pressure that comes from the ICC and those who are set to control the agenda of the ICC to our disadvantage.
Is South Africa's relationship with Russia just becoming too much to bear?
The pressure is piling up and we have to jump, not we, I mean the South African government has to jump around and the ANC, the ruling party and the government, I mean their positions are pretty similar on Russia.
Yeah.
And so naval exercises, can you explain why this is happening at the first anniversary of the Ukraine war? Wagner Group, conducting violent campaigns in many parts of Africa. We can talk about that in more detail later. Why is it that you don't speak out against those egregious, abuses of human rights and so on? Putin himself and Ukraine, why don't you show some moral support for the victims of the war? So indeed, South Africa, the government and the ANC is on the back foot. But I think, because we are a member of the BRICS alliance, I think we have chosen. We pretend to be neutral or non-aligned. We only do that in the sense, it only makes sense to talk about neutrality or non-alignment in the sense that you want to promote a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And so South Africa is not really a big enough or a strong enough player to advance such a process, but we can be complementary. South Africa can be complementary to the Turkish initiative or now the very important 12-point plan of the Chinese. And let me tell you that at the BRICS summit in August, which I think Putin might attend, or if we go to Moscow for the same reason, to have the summit there, the Chinese position will dominate. And there South Africa can play a role. So I don't think our relationship is worn out or unnecessary or without any significance. It is important.
The recent bilateral meeting that Vladimir Putin had with Xi Jinping was quite the pageantry as far as diplomacy is concerned in the world, right? It was a display of strongman leadership, many people argue. That really just signaled that, hey, there really is a new world order coming about, and the American, Western, European Union type of world order is losing its relevance. Has South Africa really taken a position in this coming about of a new world order, or have we held on to what seems to be like a non-aligned neutral position because we still rub shoulders at the G20 summit with Emmanuel Macron and Joe Biden?
Yeah. No, I think you asked the right question again. I mean, this is a very pertinent point. And unfortunately, I have to say, well, let me start by saying that the Chinese and the Russian leaders met. We don't know exactly what they discussed behind the closed door. I think China is giving Russia all kinds of extra and additional support. But there's also the emerging conversation, Oliver, about if you want to provide or develop or construct a counterpoint to the very dominant Western liberal world order, so-called rules-based world order, then you might want to look at the political economy of all of this to start with, including trade. And so global trade controlled by the US or by the OECD, if you want, by the global north, is done in dollar terms. And I think the Russians, the Chinese, the BRICS are beginning to say, and if Saudi Arabia and Iran joins, let's de-dollarize global trade and begin to trade using other currencies. And right there, you will provide a very direct threat to the status of the current world order. And so my concern is that as South Africans, we're observing this shift. It's quite important. Many academics and intellectuals write about this, and we think about this. And I mean, you know, President Thabo Mbeki, for example, is deep in thought and has written about this very same topic as well. But now, do you think we have the intellectual firepower that sits in DIRCO or in the ANC NEC subcommittee on IR to actually take this forward and for South Africa to develop a very firm position and then export this or consult with the region and the continent so that as Africans we have a position on this emerging shift in global power and influence? I don't think we're quite there yet.
Let's take some calls. 086 000 2032. 086 000 2032. Just two quick calls and then we end up then we wrap up the conversation. Elvis in Witbank. Elvis, good morning. Good evening.
Thank you.
Hi, Elvis. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to comment on the issue of the ICC wanting to arrest Putin in our country.
Yeah.
I think it will be wrong, one, because even if maybe they feel Putin has committed some crime, but that didn't happen in our country. And then secondly, I think we understand that as South Africa, we are part of BRICS. And then the only problem that is happening in the world is the global transformation that is taking place currently. There are shifts economically, despite the fact that all states have agreed during some of the United Nations conferences that we really need to change everything. I mean, the way we run our economy, because it is not participative, other people are left behind. So now I just think some of the biggest countries that used to colonize us, they're feeling pressure that at least some of the African countries are starting to have, brothers or nations that could take care of the needs of African people. Because, we have these tensions, we have all these challenges, but if you check what is the biggest cause of what is the competition around? It's our mineral resources, you see, and they've been taking advantage for all these mineral resources for years and years. At the time when we get with brothers, we are becoming solidarity that, because, this thing of the mineral resources in our country that the whole world is competing around, and at the end of the day, they even think of going to World War III just to contest for these non-renewable resources. I think it's unfair because other worlds are making treasure and good wealth out of these resources, but you look at the country which hosts the most minerals for the whole world, the people are poor. So you see that some of the things, you look at their political intentions. Their political intentions is not to change the grassroots. It's not to change the ordinary people.
Elvis, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Elvis in Witbank. Katlego and Bloemfontein. Katlego, good evening.
Good evening. I think a world war must be brewing as we speak, because all this Russia and China is doing is instigating and poking on America, and I think the Americans have been quiet for so long in this battle, and if America decides to get involved military from the military point of view, then it's going to be a bit of an issue, because now it's going to be just a war of who has the best military equipment and all that. But we're forgetting that America has nuclear bombs. Because I feel like Putin is quite a disrespectful person, especially because he decided to invade Ukraine. And South Africa were trying to be sentimental about the issue just because he was our friend. But when your friends do wrong, you tell them that this is not good. You can't invade someone's territory, and then, because that is actually against international law.
Yeah.
And so he is he's actually a delinquent. And as we speak, he's a fugitive.
Okay. Katlego, thank you so much for your call, man. Appreciate it. Gonna have to leave it there. Prof. Anthony, does the issuance of this warrant arrest edge the world closer? And by the world here, I mean whatever's brewing between China and Russia on the one hand and America and the West on the other hand. Are we edging closer towards a world war?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I don't think we should overplay the ICC warrant of arrest of Putin. I'm quite confident that before the August summit of BRICS in Pretoria or somewhere in South Africa, or maybe even in Moscow, that the matter would have been dealt with one way or the other. Putin will not be, remember I started by saying he will not be arrested and put on trial. His own security services, his own political support base, and his own ego will not allow that to happen. I wanted to say, maybe in conclusion, just in response to the second caller, that America is not standing by and is not neutral. America is quite involved. NATO is very involved in the Ukraine war. In fact, I would say that America and the mighty military-industrial complex is benefiting largely from this war in Ukraine, and it's supplying the material and is pushing for a deepening of the conflict. In fact, the NATO position is that Ukraine must win the war, meaning Ukraine with the support of the EU and America, and Russia must lose the war. They must be beaten, and they must leave Ukraine and hand back what they took. And if this is the approach of NATO, of the West, very broadly, then the conflict will spread, will deepen, it will evolve, and it will take different, more toxic forms, and that will bring us closer to this potential of a nuclear or weapons of mass destruction kind of scenario, not Putin's arrest.
Yeah. Prof. Anthony, thank you so much for your time again this evening. Really appreciate it. Your insights are always invaluable.
Thank you, Oliver, and good night.
We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this, we speak about the chaos that's going on in the city of Tshwane. Still chaotic.
SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. This Week Today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
Good afternoon, Oliver and your team. I don't think the ICC is a credible institution in that when USA attacked Iraq way back in 1991 under President George Bush, and again in 2003 under his son George W. Bush, the ICC kept quiet. People were killed in Iraq, and even the head of state of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, was killed. The ICC stay mum about that. I thank you. This is Patukol from East London.
Good evening, Oliver. Vladimir Putin, I believe he will not be arrested. I believe South Africans will not allow it. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because of DA. They went to show solidarity to the Ukraine. And now we have all seen that Russia is actually for Africa, and Russia is being bailing. There's the 20 billion that is being set aside to bail out the debt that Africa has from the NATO. So I just want to say Africans will not permit it, in particular South Africans. Thank you, Tuelo Kimberley.
Good morning, SAfm. Oh, good evening. Here's the thing, those ICC people and their NATO people, they know where's Vladimir Putin. They must arrest him if they want to. If they can't arrest him in Russia, they can't have South Africa doing their dirty job. They know he'll be flying to South Africa. They know exactly what aircraft is flying. They must send the fighter jet and intercept that aircraft of his and force it to land wherever they want. They can arrest him in mid-air over whatever state that favors them and leave us out of this thing. Evan, easy. We are not coming to that party of theirs. We are not coming. If they want to arrest Putin, they know where he is. Not us. Evan,
hello SFM and hello to the listeners. Yeah, when we put South Africa under those other European countries, China, Russia, and Britain, and those Americans also, it's like comparing South Africa with a man with 7 wives. So Putin, when he comes to South Africa, I don't think there's a chance for him to be arrested. Yeah, I don't think he will just be welcomed. But all I can expect is to see that rand dropping, losing power, losing value. That's all I expect. But arresting Putin, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's Mangope and Pretoria.
Hi, Oliver. Just one or two questions. One is there a pariah in the BRICS room? And if so, who is it? And the second part is South Africa boxing higher than its weight level? And okay, we leave it at that.
Yeah, those are two brilliant questions, actually. Two really, really good questions. Let's go to the lines and take one more caller. Tekani in Mpumalanga. Tekani, good evening.
Evening, Salvat.
I'm well. Go ahead.
No, man, I was just saying I'm being irritated also by this ICC situation.
Go ahead.
You see, when we speak of justice, justice has no eyes. Justice cannot choose whom to deal with, whom not to deal with.
Sorry, man. Can you just repeat that? Justice does not, apologies for the technical error there. It says justice does not ask who to deal with and who not to deal with.
I'm saying justice, when you speak of justice, justice can't have an eye. justice can't deal with me differently to you when you committed the same offense.
Yeah.
So I want to speak of Tony Blair and that man. Who's that man, by the way? I've forgotten that man. The former
George Bush.
George Bush. What they did in Iraq, it was exactly a nonsense. But then no measures taken against the two.
Yeah.
But then today, they are able to realize that Putin has committed some mistakes in Ukraine and charge Putin. I mean, it's absolutely wrong. And for South Africans, let us not use our stomach to think, please.
Yeah.
Let us not use our stomach to think, justifying the behavior of the West. You see, it's the West that took our forefathers some many years ago. You see, did whatever they did to our forefathers some many years ago, because of their narrow and selfishness interest. Today, we can't want to watch helplessly the West want to commit the very same mistakes on the East, because they are competing for being powers around the globe. You see, so I'm absolutely not taking nonsense of this West.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Tekane, appreciate your call, man. We're going to have to leave it there. Those people have very strong views around this Russia issue. Let's take a quick sting. On the other side of this, we speak to Prof. Levi Ndo on the matter of Tshwane. They still do not have a mayor.
This week, today with Oliver Dickson.
Levi Ndo is a political analyst. Levi, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really do appreciate it. Tshwane still, would you come to confidently call it a city in disarray, a city in political turmoil? They still do not have a mayor a week after a new speaker has been elected to office.
Good evening, Oliver. Good evening to the listeners of SAfm. Well, Tshwane can be described as a city in disarray. It can be described as a city that does not have political leadership. It can also be classified as a city that is characterized by deep confusion and conflict amongst political parties.
Yeah. It seems, though, that it's a bunch of small parties having a big brother syndrome, trying to see who can outmuscle each other in the opposition benches. And by the opposition benches, I mean opposition to the ANC at this stage, not opposition to the Democratic Alliance. So you see what is defined, broadly speaking, as the Rainbow Coalition not being able to come to agreement or come to terms with who the next leader should be, right? Very recently, there were blows that were shared in terms of words between Herman Mashaba and Helen Zille. The Patriotic Alliance and Gayton McKenzie on one hand and Helen Zille on the other hand. You see some level of support forming between the Patriotic Alliance and Action SA, but there's a growing level of distrust that's brewing between the Patriotic Alliance and the Democratic Alliance. Have these parties gone as far as their relationship in this rainbow coalition, so to speak, loosely speaking? Have they gone past their sell-by date? Have they outlived their purpose? Dr. Ndo? Ooh, seems like Dr. Ndo cannot hear us, or we cannot hear him. Let's see if we can get that audio line sorted out there. You can be a part of this conversation. Give me a call, 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032. Tshwane, in many ways, I argue, is going to become the case study for the failures of political relationships between parties in a coalition arrangement. One that broke down so deeply that many argue, with good reason, that it will become irreconcilable, to the point where in the city of Tshwane, these political parties may not be able to see past their differences, and these differences may spill over into other cities and municipalities across the country. Do you agree with that assessment? Give me a call, 086 000 2032. We're going to take a quick break to see if we can get that line sorted out. We'll continue the conversation shortly.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAfm 106.1 FM in Bombela. This week, today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
Hopefully, Professor Dr. Ndo can hear us now. Dr. Ndo, can you hear us? Prof. Ndo? Seems like
Dr. Ndo.
Yeah, there we go. Dr. Ndo's with us. That line has been sorted out. Before that line failed on us, I was asking the question, has the relationship between the Rainbow Alliance or the Rainbow Coalition partners broken down so far that it is now at the point of irreconcilable differences that exist between these parties? And by these parties, I mean Democratic Alliance and the Patriotic Alliance, Action SA and the Patriotic Alliance, to a lesser degree, Action SA and the Patriotic Alliance. Freedom Front Plus seems to be everybody's friend here. This, I argue, is going to be a template for what the relationship between coalition partners become across the country, leading into our national sphere when the time comes for it. But the moment we have now, can we say that what we witness in Tshwane is a breakdown of relations to a level of irreconcilable differences?
Well, the political relations in Tshwane and in other areas appears to be fragile, and they have to be like that because they're not based on any principle. They're actually based on how politicians or political parties are able to position themselves to get access to positions in the different municipalities. What we always have to bear in mind is that when political parties contest elections, or even when they are being formed, the intention is to occupy positions of power in the state. So whatever happens, it's about access to political power, but equally, the differences that are there in the city of Tshwane appears to be heading towards irreconcilable, but it will require strong political leadership to bring parties together in order to form a government.
Do we have the aptitude as far as the strong political leadership you're talking about in South Africa, or do we have political parties by and large across the board being led by megalomaniacs, people who themselves see themselves as statues of grandeur and not as public servants to which political maturity is an important ingredient of their work?
What I've observed is something that appears to be that different leaders of political parties appears not to be prepared to compromise on some of their positions, and there is a big brother attitude in some of these coalitions. And those are the elements that appears to be angering those that appears to be coalition partners. At the same time, those that are at local level, to a certain extent, feel that they are being undermined by their political elites because in most instances, they are being given instructions on what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. Leaders are being imposed on these local councillors, and that appears to be one of the challenges facing these people. My view is that if an opportunity is given to local councils to arrange their coalitions themselves, we can see progress in how these coalitions are being managed.
How will that reflect on the electorate, the unpreparedness on political leaders to make the necessary compromises? Are they perhaps not taking those dogmatic, strong, rigid positions because they think that's what the electorate would want? Or do you think the electorate want to see them make the necessary concessions and compromises where they see it necessary?
all political parties, rather the majority of political parties in South Africa, have already compromised themselves.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, betrayed their voters. When we're heading towards the local government elections 2 years ago, most political parties came out clear to say, we are not going to work with party so and so and so.
Yeah.
But what therefore happens after the elections is that the very same political parties started to work with those parties that they said they are not going to be working with. And that creates a perception among citizens that their leaders cannot be trusted. But what frustrates citizens more, it's when political parties, when they are in council, instead of focusing on matters of service delivery, they are preoccupied with a contestation for power. We're seeing this in the city of Tshwane. We're seeing this in other metros. And that is why in Ekurhuleni, there's going to be a motion of no confidence, because coalitions are characterized by instability in South Africa.
Yeah. So what then can political leaders do to avoid this credibility crisis that they put themselves into by taking these positions in campaign season? We will not side and vote with party so and so. We will never work with party so and so, only to end up working with them. They create this credibility crisis that they now suffer from. What then can they do in the future? Because we're very close. We're a year away from a national government election. You will hear similar rhetoric, I assume, at a national level, and you may see similar distrust that the electorate has to political parties by and large across the board. Is there a way political parties, especially newer, younger, smaller political parties, is there something they can do to restore the credibility crisis that the political establishment altogether has?
I think there is a way, and now that we're heading for general elections in the next few months, the only option available now for political parties is to start negotiating coalitions before they go to elections. In our situation in South Africa, parties will go and contest elections on their own, and immediately after the election results are announced, then they start looking for partners, and it is done in a very short space of time, and it is done in a very haphazard manner. My view is that coalitions should start to be discussed before going to elections, so that citizens would know who are the people that are going to be in coalition if they are able to be in government. So, and also, political parties should be open with their electorates and say, we will be able to work with any political party if we can also get seats in government.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea, the idea of beginning the negotiations around coalition partnerships before the election takes place. I can imagine all the other small parties like Patriotic Alliance, Action SA, AIC, Al Jamaa, I can imagine them doing that. I can't imagine the Democratic Alliance and the EFF participating in that, because they have to take the posture that we will get above 50%. We are the government in waiting. Going into coalitions preemptively signals perhaps that they have already conceded a loss, perhaps.
That describes the ambitions that political parties have. Remember, parties are formed to contest state power, and there is no party that will go to elections and say, we are not going there for a win. Maybe what we can do in South Africa might be to look at what happened in Kenya and adopt that line, in which political parties are able to work together beyond political ideological lines and ensure that for the purposes of unity in the country, they come together before elections, form these coalitions, and everything is actually well known before people actually go for elections.
That is an interesting thing that you're postulating there, the Kenya parallel, right, where you saw Raila Odinga on the one hand and Martha Karua on the other hand campaigning together, right, because Martha has a stronghold in one part of the country geographically, while Raila has a stronghold in the other part of the country, and they sort of came together as a package deal. Do you see a situation where the Freedom Front Plus partners up with the Patriotic Alliance and say, look, Patriotic Alliance, you guys can unseat the DA in certain parts of the Western Cape. We can unseat the DA in certain parts of the Western Cape. Therefore, if we come together as a package deal, we can unseat the DA altogether. Or where you see the EFF partner up with a party like Action SA because of that geographical split in where they enjoy favorability with the electorate. Is that what you're describing?
When you look at the coalitions in South Africa or political parties in South Africa are gradually moving away from being deep-rooted in an ideology. And that is why you find different political parties being able to form these coalitions based on the dynamics involved in municipality A or in council A. And that therefore indicates that the possibility of diluting ideologies are quite very high. So I think it would actually work if parties are able to sit down together and say, let's identify our strength. And where we are stronger, we form these coalitions because ideology does not matter anymore, and form these coalitions in preparation for the elections that are coming. Maybe that is one model that can actually make a difference in the body politic of South Africa.
Prof. Dr. Ndo, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it. We're going to leave it there. Let's take a quick break. On the other side of this, we wrap up the show.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAfm 105 FM in Mokopane. This Week Today with Oliver Dickson.
Good evening, Oliver. Susizo here. Listen, man, there will not be any arresting of Putin on African soil. It's not happening. That one cannot happen. We know who our allies are, and we are aligning with Russia and China and India and Brazil. And those are our allies. We are not going to be arresting one of our own. When you speak of Putin, Russia in particular, these are the guys who've supported Africa throughout history. They have never colonized Africa. They have treated us fairly. We would rather arrest everyone in the ICC and fight America than turn against Putin. We are not turning against Putin. Never. It's not happening. They must just forget about it.
And that brings us to the end of the show. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up next is Sports on with Thabiso Mosia. He will be broadcasting to you live from Orlando Stadium where Bafana will be taking on Liberia. Look, man, I really hope Bafana wins tonight. I'm not asking for a lot. 1-0, 2-1. Please, just one win. Just let us regain hope and trust in you, Bafana. That video on Twitter didn't do you a lot of favor, but we hold thumbs. We hold thumbs. From myself, Phineas and Lisiho, it's been a great show. Cheers.
Independent and impartial. This is SAfm News.
The top stories: plans to deal with tax